The morning room of Ashford Manor fell silent, save for the tick of the mantel clock and the soft crackle of fire against stone. Lady Helena Ashford stood frozen before the window, a yellowed envelope clutched in trembling fingers. 10 years. The letter had travelled for 10 years through lost postal routes and forgotten storage rooms before finding its way to her hands on this cold February morning. 10 years too late to change anything, or so she believed. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Even after a decade, she would have recognized those firm strokes anywhere. Lord Edmund Blackstone. The man she had loved with the fierce devotion of youth. The man she had believed had abandoned her without a word of explanation. The man whose silence had shaped every decision she had made since. Her hands shook as she broke the aged seal. The wax crumbled like ash between her fingers. Inside, the paper was crisp with time, the ink faded but still legible. As her eyes moved across the first line, the world she had known for 10 years began to crack and shatter like ice beneath a spring thaw. My dearest Helena, by the time you read this, I shall be on a ship bound for India. Not by choice, but by necessity. What I am about to tell you will pain you as it pains me to write it, but you deserve truth, even if that truth comes too late to save us. Helena's vision blurred. The fire before her wavered and danced as tears gathered in her eyes. She sank into the nearest chair, the letter pressed against her chest as though it were his heart beating beneath her palm. 10 years. What had he written? What truth had she lived without all this time? With shaking breath, she lowered her gaze to the page once more. I love you. I have loved you from the moment you stumbled into my father's library searching for a book on Shakespeare and found me instead. I loved you through every stolen conversation, every forbidden walk in the gardens, every moment we pretended the world did not exist beyond our own. And I love you still as I write these words, knowing that what I must do will destroy any chance we might have had. No, Helena whispered to the empty room. No, you left. You chose to leave. But the letter continued, relentless in its revelation. Your brother, Thomas, came to me 3 nights ago. He told me what your father had discovered. Not merely our attachment, which he had long suspected, but something far more dangerous. Your father had learned of my own father's debts, debts so vast and shameful that they would ruin not only the Blackstone name, but any family connected to it through marriage. Helena's breath caught. Thomas had never spoken of this, not once in 10 years. Lord Ashford made his position clear. If I pursued you, if I dared speak the vows we had whispered to one another beneath the oak tree in your garden, he would ensure that the scandal of my family's ruin would extend to yours. Every creditor would be informed of our connection. Every merchant would be told that the Ashfords had tied themselves to a sinking ship. Your father would be destroyed by association. Your mother's health, already fragile, would not survive the shock. Your sisters, innocent and young, would never make suitable marriages. Their futures would be ashes because of my selfishness. The paper crumpled slightly in Helena's grip. She forced herself to keep reading, though each word felt like a blade. Thomas begged me to leave. He said, if I truly loved you, I would release you. He promised me that in time you would forget, that you would marry well and be happy, that your family would be safe and prosperous. All I had to do was disappear, write no letter, send no word, let you believe I had simply tired of our attachment and moved on to more suitable prospects. I tried, Helena. God knows I tried to find another way. But the debts were real. The threat to your family was real, and the choice before me was clear. Destroy the woman I love and everyone she holds dear, or vanish as though I had never existed in your life at all. Helena stood abruptly, pacing before the fire as the truths she had lived without settled upon her like a shroud. He had not abandoned her. He had sacrificed himself for her. He had chosen her family's safety over his own happiness, over their happiness. "I leave for India tomorrow," the letter continued. "I have secured a position with the East India Company. It is dangerous work, but it will pay enough to settle my father's debts within 5 years, if I am careful, perhaps longer if fortune does not favor me. By the time I return, you will surely be married to a man worthy of you. A man who can give you everything I cannot. The life you deserve, the security your family requires. I write this letter knowing it may never reach you. Your brother made me promise I would not contact you, and I have given my word. But I am weak enough, selfish enough, to hope that perhaps this letter will find you someday when enough time has passed that it no longer matters. When you are happy with another, when our attachment is nothing more than a distant memory of youth. If that day ever comes, know this, Helena Ashford. You were the best thing in my wretched life. You were light in darkness. You were hope when I had none. And though I could not keep you, though I could not stand beside you as I longed to do, I loved you. I love you still. I shall love you until my last breath. Whether that breath comes on foreign soil or in the England I am leaving behind. Forgive me for my silence. Forgive me for what you must believe is betrayal. And if you can, forget me entirely. Be happy, my darling. Be everything you were meant to be. And if sometimes you think of the foolish young man who once made you laugh in your father's library, think of him kindly, for he carries your memory like a candle in the dark, guiding him through whatever comes next. Yours always, even in absence, Edmund. The letter fell from Helena's hands, drifting to the floor like a fallen leaf. She stood motionless, staring at the flames, as 10 years of carefully constructed understanding burned away to nothing. He had loved her. He had not abandoned her. He had left to save her, and she had married another. The sound of footsteps in the corridor startled her from her thoughts. She quickly retrieved the letter from the floor, pressing it between the pages of a book on the side table just as the morning room door opened. "Helena," her husband's voice was cool and measured as always. "I did not expect to find you here at this hour. Is something amiss?" Lord William Grayson stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in riding clothes, his expression one of mild curiosity. They had been married for 8 years. It was a comfortable marriage, a respectable marriage, a marriage entirely devoid of passion or deep affection, though neither of them had ever acknowledged that truth aloud. "Nothing is amiss," Helena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was merely reading." William's gaze swept the room, noting the book on the side table, the abandoned teacup, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. He was not an unkind man, nor was he particularly attentive. He accepted her answer with a nod. "Very well. I am off to inspect the northern fields. I shall return for dinner, of course." He departed as he had arrived, present but not truly there. It had been this way since their wedding day, when Helena had stood at the altar with eyes still red from crying over another man's absence. William had asked no questions. He had required no explanations. He had simply offered his name and his protection, and she had accepted because it was what her family needed, what she was supposed to do. But now, as his footsteps faded down the corridor, Helena stood alone with a truth that changed everything. Edmund had loved her. Edmund had sacrificed everything for her, and somewhere, perhaps still in India, perhaps returned to England without her knowledge. He still believed she had forgotten him. The question that burned in her chest was simple and terrible. What was she meant to do with this knowledge now? Now that 10 years had passed, now that she was Lady Grayson, respected and settled, now that changing anything would require unmaking an entire life. The clock on the mantel chimed the hour. Each strike felt like a condemnation. Time had moved forward. Life had continued. But the letter in her hands proved that some truths refused to remain buried, no matter how many years pass. And Helena Ashford Grayson, who had spent a decade learning to live without love, now had to decide whether she possessed the courage to confront the past that had just arrived on her doorstep, 10 years too late to be convenient, but perhaps not too late to change everything. The gardens of Ashford Manor had always been Helena's refuge. Here, among the winter roses and bare branches waiting for spring, she could think without the weight of expectation pressing upon her shoulders. It was here she had first kissed Edmund Blackstone, beneath the ancient oak that had witnessed 3 generations of Ashford secrets. And it was here she now walked, the letter tucked inside her cloak, burning against her ribs like a brand. 2 days had passed since its arrival. 2 days of normal conversation with William over breakfast. 2 days of smiling at the housekeeper and instructing the maids. 2 days of pretending that her entire understanding of the past decade had not been overturned by yellowed paper and faded ink. She had read the letter perhaps 50 times. Each reading revealed new details, new pain, new questions. Why had Thomas never told her the truth? Her brother had watched her suffer, had held her as she wept over Edmund's desertion, had encouraged her to accept William's proposal, all while knowing the real reason for Edmund's disappearance. The crunch of footsteps on gravel interrupted her thoughts. Helena turned to find her brother approaching, his expression concerned. "Eliza said, you've been out here for hours," Thomas said, drawing his coat tighter against the February chill. "You'll catch your death. Would that trouble you?" The words emerged more bitter than she had intended. Thomas stopped short, surprised by her tone. "Helena, what's wrong?" She withdrew the letter from her cloak and held it out to him. Even from a distance, she saw recognition flash across his face. Recognition and something that looked like fear. "Where did you get that?" His voice was barely audible. "It arrived 2 days ago. 10 years after it was written. 10 years after you convinced Edmund Blackstone to leave without telling me why." Thomas took a step back as though she had struck him. "You don't understand. Then help me understand, brother. Help me understand why you let me believe I had been abandoned by a man who found me wanting. Why you watched me marry William while carrying this secret. Why you allowed me to spend 10 years thinking myself foolish for ever having loved a man who did not love me in return. He did love you." Thomas's voice cracked. "That was why it had to be this way." "Explain." Helena's hands clenched at her sides. "Explain to me how love requires such cruelty." Thomas moved to the stone bench beneath the oak tree and sat heavily, suddenly looking older than his 35 years. Father was dying. Helena stared. "What?" Father was dying. The physician had told him 6 months at most. His heart was failing. Mother didn't know. We didn't want to frighten her. But Father knew, and he was desperate to secure your future before he passed. The world tilted slightly. Their father had died 7 months after Edmund's departure. Helena had believed it was grief over some unspecified business troubles. What does that have to do with Edmund? Everything. Thomas rubbed his face wearily. The Blackstone debts were real, catastrophic. If you had married Edmund, your children would have inherited nothing but shame and ruin. Father couldn't bear it. He had failed in so many ways already. Failed to manage the estate properly. Failed to provide adequately for your sisters. The only thing he could still do was prevent you from chaining yourself to a sinking ship. So he threatened Edmund. No. Thomas looked up at her, his eyes haunted. "I threatened Edmund. Father had collapsed that morning. The physician said he had weeks, perhaps days. Father was barely conscious, but he kept asking if you were safe, if you would be provided for. I couldn't tell him no. I couldn't let him die with that fear. Helena sank onto the bench beside her brother, the anger draining out of her like water from a cracked vessel. Edmund came to me that evening to ask formal permission to court you openly. Thomas continued. I told him about Father, about the debts, about how his family's ruin would destroy ours. I begged him to leave, to give you a chance to marry someone who could actually protect you. And he agreed, after 3 hours of arguing. After I showed him Father's physician reports, after I made him understand that loving you meant letting you go, Thomas's voice broke. He loved you so much, Helena. That was why he left. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were everything, and he couldn't bear to watch you suffer for his family's mistakes. Silence settled between them, broken only by the wind through bare branches. I married William, Helena said finally. A man I respect but do not love. I have lived 8 years in a house where I am appreciated but not cherished. I have been safe and comfortable and completely hollow inside, and all of it was unnecessary. Was it? Thomas met her gaze. William provided for you. He gave you security. When Father died, 3 weeks after Edmund left, you had a future. Your sisters made good marriages because your reputation remained intact. Mother lived her final years in peace. If Edmund had stayed, if you had married him, none of that would have been possible. You would have been ruined. All of us would have been. And now, Elena's voice was raw. Now that the letter has arrived, now that I know the truth. What am I meant to do with this knowledge, Thomas? Put it away and continue pretending, go on being Lady Grayson and forget that the man I loved sacrificed everything for me while I hated him for abandoning me? I don't know. Thomas reached for her hand. I only know that I made the choice I thought was right. Edmund made the choice he thought was right, and you made the choice you were able to make with the information you had. None of us are villains in this story, Helena. We're all just people who did the best we could with terrible options. Helena pulled her hand away and stood, pacing before the oak tree where she had once promised Edmund forever. Where is he now? Do you know if he returned from India? If he survived? Thomas hesitated. I made inquiries some years ago, nothing formal, just quiet questions through old university connections. He returned to England 5 years ago. He settled his father's debts. He purchased a small estate in Derbyshire. He never married. The words hung in the cold air. He never married. Somewhere in Derbyshire, Edmund Blackstone lived alone, believing Helena had forgotten him, believing she was happy with another, believing his sacrifice had given her the life she deserved. Don't, Thomas said quietly, reading her thoughts. Don't go to him, Helena. You're Lady Grayson now. You have a husband, a position, responsibilities. Digging up the past will only hurt everyone involved. The past has already been dug up, Helena replied. The letter saw to that. The question is not whether the past matters, but what I'm meant to do now that I know the truth. Do nothing, Thomas urged. For everyone's sake. Let it remain what it was. A tragedy, yes, but an old one. Don't create a new tragedy by trying to undo what cannot be changed. Helena did not answer. She turned and walked back toward the house, her mind a storm of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Behind her, Thomas remained on the bench beneath the oak, his head in his hands, perhaps remembering the night he had asked Edmund Blackstone to break both their hearts for the sake of duty and protection. Inside Ashford Manor, the letter waited where Helena had left it, tucked between pages of poetry. Its words had not changed. But everything Helena believed about herself, about her past, about the choices she had made, had been transformed utterly. And somewhere in Derbyshire, a man she had loved and lost through no fault of his own went about his days, unaware that the letter he had written a decade ago had finally reached its destination. The question that plagued Helena through sleepless nights was simple and terrible. Should she let him continue believing she had moved on? Or did she owe him the truth that she had never forgotten, never stopped loving him, even when she believed he had betrayed her? The clock in the hallway chimed midnight. Helena stood at her bedroom window, looking out across moonlit gardens, toward a past that refused to stay buried, and a future that suddenly felt more uncertain than ever. If you're finding this story powerful, please take a moment to like and comment below. Let us know what you would do in Helena's place. Your engagement helps us continue creating these emotional journeys through history's most complicated hearts. Spring arrived at Grayson Hall with reluctant beauty, as though even the flowers understood that their blooms were wasted on a house without joy. Helena moved through her days with practiced grace, managing household affairs, receiving callers, attending church, and smiling when required. But inside, she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. William noticed nothing amiss, or perhaps he simply chose not to notice. Their marriage had never required deep observation or emotional connection. It was a partnership of convenience and mutual respect, nothing more. He attended to his business affairs. She attended to the home. They dined together, sometimes conversed about neutral topics, and maintained separate bedrooms without comment or complaint. It had been enough before the letter arrived. Or perhaps it had never been enough, and Helena had simply grown skilled at pretending it was. The letter remained hidden in her writing desk, removed now from the book of poetry and placed beneath a stack of correspondence. She took it out, sometimes late at night, when William was asleep in his own rooms, reading it by candlelight until the words blurred with tears. She had not written to Edmund. She had not made inquiries about his direction. She had done nothing except exist in the strange limbo between the life she had lived and the truth that had finally been revealed. Until the afternoon Lady Caroline Winters came to call. Caroline had been Helena's dearest friend since childhood, one of the few people who knew about her attachment to Edmund Blackstone all those years ago. She had been present at Helena's wedding to William, watching with concerned eyes as Helena had spoken vows in a voice devoid of feeling. They had maintained their friendship through letters and occasional visits, though Caroline lived primarily in London now, married to a wealthy merchant who adored her. "You look terrible," Caroline announced without preamble when they were alone in the morning room with the door closed against eavesdropping servants. "What has happened?" Helena had not intended to tell her. She had planned to maintain her silence, to keep the letter's existence secret as she had kept so many other truths hidden over the years. But Caroline's direct concern, her genuine affection, broke through Helena's careful defenses. "A letter arrived," she said simply, and then the entire story spilled out. Edmund's sacrifice, Thomas's intervention, the 10 years of misunderstanding, the knowledge that changed everything while changing nothing at all. Caroline listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to sorrow to something that looked like anger. When Helena finished, Caroline stood and paced before the window, her silk skirts rustling with agitation. "Thomas should be horsewhipped," she declared. "I don't care what his reasons were. He had no right to play God with your life. He was trying to protect me. He was trying to protect everyone, except you." Caroline turned to face her friend. "Helena, you must write to Edmund. You must tell him you received the letter. You must give him the truth he has lived without all these years." "I'm married, Caroline. Writing to another man, especially one I was attached to before my marriage, would be highly improper." "Propriety?" Caroline's voice rose slightly. "You're concerned with propriety now, after everything you've learned?" "I'm concerned with not destroying what remains of my life." Helena stood as well, her hands clasped tightly together. "If I write to Edmund, what then? Do I ask him to meet me? Do I confess that I never forgot him? Do I tell him that my marriage to William is a hollow shell of duty and nothing more? And what good would any of it do? I cannot undo my vows. I cannot leave William without cause. I cannot simply return to the past and pretend the last decade didn't happen." "But you can give Edmund peace," Caroline said softly. "You can release him from believing that he sacrificed everything for nothing. Can't you see, Helena? He spent 10 years thinking you had forgotten him, thinking you were happy. If he knew the truth, that you never stopped loving him, that you married William only because you believed Edmund had abandoned you, he would at least have that. The knowledge that his sacrifice mattered, that you never truly moved on." The words struck something deep in Helena's heart. She had been so focused on her own pain, her own confusion, that she had not fully considered Edmund's. He had given up everything, believing it would give her happiness. But she had not been happy. She had been safe, provided for, respected, but never happy. What would I even say to him? Helena whispered, "How do I put into words what this letter has done to me?" "Start with the truth," Caroline suggested. "Tell him you received his letter. Tell him you finally understand why he left. Tell him that he was never forgotten. That's all. Just give him that much." Helena moved to the window, looking out across the gardens where spring blooms nodded in the breeze. It seemed cruel that the world could be so beautiful when her heart felt so heavy. "And if he writes back?" she asked. "If knowing the truth opens wounds that have finally healed for him? Am I not being selfish in burdening him with this knowledge?" "Perhaps," Caroline admitted. "Or perhaps knowing the truth will free him in ways we cannot predict. Either way, doesn't he deserve to know? He wrote to you in hopes that the letter would reach you someday. That was his choice. Now the letter has arrived. Shouldn't you honor his choice by responding?" The logic was sound, but the risk felt overwhelming. Still, as Helena stood in the morning room with her dearest friend, she felt something shift inside her. Not a decision yet, but a possibility. The possibility that silence was not always protection, that sometimes truth, however painful, was owed. "I will consider it," she said finally. "That is all I can promise right now." Caroline embraced her tightly. "That's all I ask. Just consider it. And Helena, whatever you decide, know that you have lived with more grace and strength than most people could manage. You are not weak for feeling lost now. You're human." After Caroline departed, Helena returned to her writing desk and withdrew Edmund's letter once more. She read it through slowly, carefully, noting every word he had chosen, every sentiment he had expressed, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully imagine writing back. "Dear Edmund," she whispered to the empty room, testing the words. "Your letter arrived 10 years late, but perhaps that means it arrived exactly when it was meant to, when I was finally ready to know the truth." The words felt both terrifying and necessary. She did not write them down, not yet, but she held them in her heart as evening fell and William returned home for another proper, distant dinner. As they ate in near silence, discussing nothing of importance, Helena imagined what it might feel like to speak the truth aloud, to acknowledge that she had loved another man before their marriage and had never truly stopped. But she said nothing. Not yet. The possibility lived in the space between thought and action, growing stronger each day while remaining safely unspoken. Until the morning 3 weeks later, when a letter arrived bearing a seal she did not recognize and handwriting that made her breath catch in her throat. Edmund Blackstone had written to her again. After 10 years of silence, after believing she had moved on, he had somehow learned that his first letter had reached her, and now he was asking a question she had no idea how to answer. Are you still with us? If this story is touching your heart, please let us know in the comments. Your words inspire us to continue these journeys through love, loss, and the truths that change everything. Helena's hands trembled as she broke the seal on the second letter. She was alone in the morning room, having sent the maid away immediately upon recognizing Edmund's handwriting. The envelope was new, crisp, expensive paper bearing a Derbyshire postmark dated just 5 days prior. How had he known? How had he learned that his decade-old letter had finally reached her? The answer came in the first lines of his message. My dearest Helena, I write to you now because your brother Thomas came to see me 3 days ago. He informed me that my letter from 10 years past had finally been delivered to you. He told me that you now know the truth of why I left, and he begged me, for the sake of your reputation and your marriage, not to attempt any contact with you. Helena's breath caught. Thomas had gone to Edmund. Her brother had travelled to Derbyshire to warn Edmund away from her, presumably fearing exactly what was now happening. A correspondence that could ruin everything Helena had built in the decades since Edmund's departure. I agreed to his request. Edmund's letter continued. Because I have spent 10 years learning to put your needs before my own desires. If my silence serves you better than my voice, then I shall remain silent. If my absence protects you, then I shall stay absent. This is what love requires, Helena, not possession, but sacrifice. Tears blurred the words. Helena blinked them away, desperate to read on. But I could not let Thomas's visit pass without sending you this one final message, not because I wish to disrupt your life or cause you pain, but because I need you to know something that I failed to adequately express in my first letter, written in haste and desperation so many years ago. I do not regret leaving. Even now, knowing that you married another while believing I had abandoned you, even knowing that my sacrifice caused you pain rather than the happiness I intended, I do not regret choosing your family's safety over our attachment. I would make the same choice again, Helena. Every time, because loving you meant wanting the best for you, even when that meant removing myself from your life entirely. But I do regret that you spent 10 years believing yourself unworthy of love, because that is what Thomas tells me you believed. That you thought I had found you lacking, that you married Lord Grayson believing yourself fortunate, that any man of good standing would accept you after being jilted by another. Helena, you were never lacking. You were everything. You are everything. The woman who argued philosophy with me in your father's library. The woman who laughed without restraint at my terrible jokes. The woman who saw past my family's disgrace to the man I wanted to be. That woman deserved a husband who could provide for her without destroying her family. That woman deserved security and respect and all the things I could not give her. I left not because you were not enough, but because I loved you too much to let my own failures ruin you. That is the truth I need you to carry forward. Whatever life you have built with Lord Grayson, however you have learned to be happy, do not build it on the foundation of believing yourself inadequate. You were, and are, extraordinary. Thomas has asked me not to write to you again, and I shall honor that request. This letter will be the last you receive from me, but I wanted you to have this truth before we part for good. You were loved. Helena, completely, devastatingly, permanently. The fact that I could not keep you does not diminish the reality that you were always, always enough. I wish you happiness. I wish you peace. I wish you everything you dreamed of when we were young and foolish and believed that love alone could solve every problem. And if sometimes in quiet moments you think of that foolish young man who loved you in your father's library, know that he thinks of you as well, every day, with gratitude for what we had and acceptance of what we could not have. Yours in memory and distance, Edmund. Helena read the letter 3 times before she could fully process its contents. Edmund was saying goodbye. Again, choosing her comfort over his own desires, protecting her reputation even now, 10 years after his first sacrifice. And Thomas had known. Thomas had gone to Edmund and asked him to stay away from her, presumably believing he was protecting her from scandal and ruin. Her brother meant well, he always meant well, but his interference had shaped her entire life. And now he was interfering again, deciding what was best for her without giving her any voice in the decision. The anger that rose in Helena's chest was white-hot and clarifying. For 10 years she had been passive. For 10 years she had accepted what others decided was best for her. She had married William because it was practical. She had stopped grieving Edmund because it was expected. She had built a life of quiet respectability because that was what a woman in her position was supposed to do. But she was 32 years old now, not the frightened 22-year-old who had lost her father and her first love in the same season. She was the Viscountess Grayson, with her own household and her own resources, and she was tired of being protected from her own life. She pulled out fresh paper and began to write before she could talk herself out of it. Dear Edmund, I received your second letter, and I am writing back despite Thomas's instructions to both of us. I am writing because you have spent 10 years making decisions based on what you believed was best for me, and I think it is time I had some say in what serves my own happiness. Her pen flew across the page. 10 years of unspoken words pouring out in a torrent. You ask me not to believe myself inadequate, but how could I believe otherwise when the man I loved vanished without explanation? You ask me to be happy in my marriage, but I cannot be happy in a life built on misunderstanding and duty rather than truth and choice. I married William, believing you had abandoned me. I made my vows while hating myself for ever having trusted you. I built a life as Lady Grayson while trying desperately to become someone who did not care that you were gone. And I succeeded. Edmund, I became exactly what I was supposed to be: respectable, composed, empty. Your first letter shattered that carefully constructed existence, and now your second letter asks me to piece it back together and continue as though nothing has changed. But everything has changed. I know now that I spent 10 years grieving a betrayal that never happened. I know now that you sacrificed everything believing it would make me happy, when in fact it condemned us both to lives half-lived. I do not know what I want from you, Edmund. I do not know what is possible between us now, with marriage vows and miles and 10 years standing between what we were and what we might have been. But I know I am done allowing others to decide my future without my consent. I am writing to you against my brother's wishes, because you deserve to know that your letters arrived, that they mattered, that you have not been forgotten or dismissed. You sacrificed everything for me, and I will not dishonor that sacrifice by pretending the truth does not exist, simply because acknowledging it is inconvenient. I do not ask you to respond. I do not ask you to act. I am simply giving you the same gift you tried to give me 10 years ago, the truth. However painful, however complicated, you say you were mine in memory and distance. Know that I was yours as well. I am yours still, in whatever way that can be true for a woman who belongs legally and publicly to another. This is not a declaration of improper intentions. It is simply an acknowledgement that some loves do not end simply because circumstances require them to be set aside. Yours in truth and complexity, Helena. She sealed the letter before she could reconsider. Then she summoned a footman and instructed him to post it immediately, using her own funds rather than the household account. William would not know she had sent it. Thomas would not know. This was her choice, made freely, for perhaps the first time in a decade. The letter was gone before dinner, carried away on the afternoon post, and Helena felt simultaneously terrified and lighter than she had in years. She had spoken. She had claimed her own voice. Whatever came next would be a consequence of her own choice, rather than someone else's decision about what was best for her. That evening, as she sat across from William at dinner, she looked at him with new eyes. He was not a bad man. He had never been cruel or harsh. He had given her a comfortable life, a respected position, financial security, but he had never given her his heart, and she had never given him hers. They were partners in a business arrangement that happened to be called marriage, and perhaps that had been enough for both of them. Until now. Until the letter arrived and changed everything Helena thought she knew about her past and her present and what she might deserve from her future. "You seem preoccupied," William observed, cutting his roast with precise movements. "Is something troubling you?" Helena considered lying, maintaining the pleasant fiction of contentment, but she found herself suddenly incapable of continuing the charade. "I received a letter," she said carefully, "from someone I knew before our marriage. It has raised questions I had long since buried." William's knife stilled for a moment. Then he resumed cutting, his expression neutral. "I see. Should I be concerned?" "I don't know," Helena answered honestly. "Perhaps we should discuss what our marriage actually is, William, what it has been, what we want it to be going forward." Her husband looked up, meeting her gaze for perhaps the first time in months, and in his eyes she saw not anger or jealousy, but something that looked almost like relief. "Perhaps we should," he agreed quietly. "I have been aware for some time that ours is not a love match, Helena. I have never pressed you on the matter because you seemed content with our arrangement. But if that has changed, then yes, we should discuss it." The admission hung between them, honest and surprisingly gentle. They were strangers who shared a name and a home, and perhaps it was time they acknowledged the truth instead of continuing to pretend otherwise. But that conversation would have to wait. Because even as Helena sat at dinner trying to be present in her current life, her mind kept returning to the letter she had sent, to Edmund reading her words, to what might happen next. She had stepped off the edge of safety into unknown territory, and there was no way to know whether she would fly or fall. Stay with us. The story is only beginning to unfold. If Helena's courage inspires you, let us know in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive. The weeks that followed Helena's letter were an agony of waiting. Every day she expected a response from Edmund. Every day brought nothing but ordinary correspondence, household accounts and social invitations. She began to wonder if her letter had even reached him, or if perhaps he had received it and chosen not to respond. Thomas visited twice during those weeks, his expression watchful and concerned. "Have you heard from him?" he asked during his second visit, the question barely veiled despite his attempt at casual conversation. "No," Helena answered truthfully, "I have heard nothing." Relief flickered across her brother's face. "Good. That's good, Helena. It means he's honoring our agreement, that he's staying away as I asked." She said nothing about her own letter. Let Thomas believe his interference had been successful. Let him think the matter was settled. Helena no longer had the energy to argue with those who believed they knew what was best for her. Her conversation with William had been postponed several times due to his business travel. He seemed as reluctant as she was to address the truth of their marriage directly, but they had been more honest with each other in small ways, more present at meals, more willing to acknowledge the distance between them rather than pretending it didn't exist. "I do care for you," William had said one evening over port. "In my way, I hope you know that." "I know," Helena had replied, "and I appreciate all you have provided for me. The security, the respectability. I do not take those things for granted. It was not love, but it was truth. And truth," Helena was learning, had its own value even when it was not romantic. 6 weeks after she had sent her letter to Edmund, another envelope arrived. But this one did not bear Edmund's handwriting. It was from his household steward, a Mr. Blackwood, and it was brief and formal. "My lady, I write to inform you that Lord Edmund Blackstone departed for the Americas 3 weeks ago. He has purchased land in Virginia and intends to establish a new estate there. He left instructions that all his correspondence should be forwarded, but given the distance and difficulty of overseas post, he anticipates being largely unreachable for the next year at minimum. Before his departure, his lordship asked me to convey to you that he received your most recent letter. He read it multiple times and carried it with him when he left. He wished you to know that your words gave him a peace he had not experienced in many years. He asked me to tell you that he considers your courage in writing to be a gift he will treasure always. As to why his lordship chose to depart so suddenly for the Americas, he confided only that he believed distance would serve all parties better than proximity. He hopes that in removing himself entirely from England, he might give you the freedom to build whatever life you choose, without his presence complicating matters. Lord Blackstone asked me to express his gratitude for all that was, and his best wishes for all that may be. He will not be returning to England for the foreseeable future. If you have need to contact him, letters may be sent to this estate and will be forwarded as shipping routes allow. Your obedient servant, Mr. Jonathan Blackwood, estate steward to Lord Edmund Blackstone. Helena read the letter 3 times before its meaning fully settled. Edmund had left. Not just Derbyshire, but England entirely. He had read her letter, carried it with him across an ocean, and then put an impossible distance between them to ensure she would not be burdened by his presence. Another sacrifice, another choice made for her benefit without consulting her wishes. Edmund was still trying to protect her, still believing that his absence served her better than his proximity, and perhaps he was right. Perhaps an ocean between them was exactly what they both needed to finally move forward with their separate lives. But the knowledge that he was gone, truly and completely gone now, struck Helena with a grief she had not expected. She had not seen Edmund in 10 years. She had built an entire life without him. Why did his departure to Virginia feel like losing him all over again? Caroline arrived the next day, summoned by a desperate note Helena had sent. They walked the gardens together, the spring blooms now giving way to summer roses, as Helena explained everything. "He left because he read my letter," Helena said, her voice hollow. "He left because I told him I wasn't happy, because I refused to pretend anymore. My honesty drove him away." "No," Caroline corrected firmly. "His desire to give you freedom drove him away. Don't you see, Helena? He finally understands that you never forgot him, that you've been as trapped by the past as he was, and his response was to remove himself completely so you could have space to breathe, to choose, to build whatever life you want without worrying about him. I don't want him to sacrifice himself for me again," Helena said, tears finally breaking through her composure. "I want him to stop deciding what's best for me. I want him to be selfish for once. I want him to ask me what I want instead of always choosing my theoretical happiness over his own." Caroline embraced her friend tightly. "Then you need to tell him that. Write to him in Virginia. Tell him exactly what you just told me. What good would it do? He'll be gone a year or more, and I'm still married to William. Nothing has changed, except now Edmund is even further away than before. Everything has changed, Caroline insisted, pulling back to look Helena in the eye. You've stopped pretending. You've acknowledged the truth. You've claimed your voice. Those are not small things, Helena, and maybe, just maybe, they're the beginning of finding a way forward, rather than simply existing in the limbo you've inhabited for 10 years. Helena wiped her tears and looked out across the gardens, where she had once promised Edmund forever, where she had later walked as William's wife, trying to convince herself that duty was enough, where she now stood, 32 years old, and finally admitting that some wounds do not heal through silence and pretense. What if there is no way forward? She asked quietly. What if the best we can hope for is to live with the truth, but apart? Edmund in Virginia, me in England, both of us finally honest about what was lost but unable to reclaim it. Then at least you'll have truth, Caroline replied. And truth, however painful, is always better than beautiful lies. That evening Helena sat at her writing desk and began another letter. This one would take months to reach Virginia, months more before she could expect any response. But she wrote anyway because Caroline was right. Truth mattered, and Edmund deserved to know that his sacrifices, while well-intentioned, were not what Helena wanted from him anymore. Dear Edmund, I received word of your departure to Virginia. I understand why you went. I understand you believe distance serves me better than proximity. But I need you to understand something in return. I am tired of being protected. I am tired of men making decisions for me based on what they think I need. I am tired of sacrificing my voice to spare others discomfort. I do not ask you to return. I do not ask you to disrupt your new life. But I ask you to stop making choices about our connection without consulting me. You left 10 years ago to protect me. You left again 3 weeks ago for the same reason. When will you trust me to decide what serves my own happiness? You carried my letter with you across an ocean. I carry yours with me everywhere I go. We are both trapped by decisions made long ago, but we are also both still alive, still capable of choosing differently. I do not know what that choice might look like, but I refuse to spend the rest of my life being protected from my own desires. Write to me from Virginia. Tell me about the land you purchased. Tell me what you're building there. Share your life with me, even if only in letters. Stop sacrificing yourself for my theoretical benefit and start living for your own happiness. That is what I want from you, Edmund. Not more noble distance, but genuine connection, however complicated it may be. Yours in honesty and hope, Helena. She sealed the letter and addressed it to Edmund's Virginia estate. Then she posted it herself, walking to the village, refusing to send a servant. This choice, this connection, was hers alone to manage. When she returned to Grayson Hall, William was waiting in the library. He looked up from his papers as she entered, his expression serious but not angry. "We need to have that conversation," he said quietly, "about what our marriage is and what we both want going forward. I think we've postponed it long enough." Helena nodded, removing her bonnet and gloves. "I think you're right." They sat across from each other, not as husband and wife in the traditional sense, but as two people who had shared a decade of life together and deserved honesty from one another. "I am in love with someone else," Helena said, speaking the words aloud for the first time. "I have been since before we married. I did not lie to you about it, because I truly believed he had abandoned me. I thought what I felt for him was dead. But it was only dormant, and now it's awake again, and I don't know what to do with that truth, except acknowledge it exists." William was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I suspected as much. You've never looked at me the way you look into the distance when you think no one is watching. I've never asked for your heart, Helena, because I knew it was elsewhere. Do you hate me for it? No, he smiled sadly. I married you, knowing you did not love me. It seemed a fair exchange. You needed security. I needed a respectable wife to satisfy my mother and society. We have both fulfilled our parts of that bargain admirably. Is that enough for you? Helena asked. Living this way? With respect and courtesy, but no passion? William considered the question carefully. It was enough. Perhaps it still is. I am not a man of deep emotions, Helena. I find contentment in order and stability. You have provided both. But if you are not content, if this arrangement no longer serves you, then we should discuss what options exist. The honesty was both painful and freeing. I don't want to leave you, Helena said slowly. You've been good to me, William, kind in your way. And I have no illusions that society would look favorably on me seeking separation or annulment without cause. But I also cannot continue pretending that this is enough for me when it isn't. Then, what do you propose? Helena took a deep breath. Honesty. Between us, at least, I will not shame you publicly. I will not create scandal. But I want the freedom to correspond with Edmund without hiding it from you. I want to stop pretending that I am content when I am not. I want us to acknowledge what our marriage actually is, rather than maintaining a fiction that serves no one. William absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. And if this correspondence with your Edmund becomes more than letters, what then? I don't know, Helen admitted. He's in Virginia, I'm here. There is an ocean between us and a decade of missed life. Perhaps letters are all we'll ever have, but I want them to be honest. Letters, not secrets I keep from my husband. Very well. William stood and moved to the window, looking out at the estate he managed with such careful precision. I agree to your terms, Helena. Correspond with him openly. Stop pretending for my benefit, and in return, I ask only that you maintain the appearance of a proper marriage in public, attend events with me when required, manage the household as you have been. Give me that much respect, and you may have whatever freedom you need in private. It was not love, it was not even affection in the romantic sense, but it was truth and respect, and a mutual agreement that served them both better than the lie they had been living. Thank you, Helena said quietly. You are kinder than I deserve. Perhaps. William turned back to face her. Or perhaps we are both simply people who married for practical reasons and are now trying to survive the consequences with as much dignity as we can manage. There is no shame in that, Helena, only reality. She left him in the library and returned to her writing desk, where Edmund's letters lay hidden no longer. She took them out and placed them in plain sight, a declaration of truth in a life that had been built on necessary fictions. Somewhere across an ocean, Edmund was building a new life in Virginia. Somewhere in England, Helena was finally claiming her voice and her truth, and between them, letters would travel carrying honesty that had been 10 years delayed, but was no less real for the wait. The story was not over. Perhaps it was only just beginning. Are you still with us on this journey? Let us know in the comments what you think Helena should do next. Your engagement means everything to us and helps us continue creating these stories of love, truth, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. 3 months passed before Helena received Edmund's response from Virginia. 3 months of summer turning to autumn, of managing Grayson Hall with William's new understanding, of slowly learning to live with truth rather than comfortable fiction. When the letter finally arrived, bearing stamps from multiple ports and looking worn from its long journey, Helena's hands shook as she broke the seal. Edmund's handwriting was unchanged, still firm and clear despite whatever hardships he faced in his new life. But his words were different, more honest, less careful about protecting her from difficult realities. My dearest Helena, your letter found me knee-deep in Virginia mud, trying to understand why the foundation I had paid a contractor to build was sinking into the ground. The irony was not lost on me, that I had traveled across an ocean to escape sinking into the past, only to find myself literally sinking into American soil. Helena smiled despite her nerves, recognizing Edmund's dry humor emerging for the first time in their correspondence. You are right, of course, his letter continued. I have spent 10 years making decisions for you without consulting your wishes. In my defense, for 9 of those years I believed you had moved on and forgotten me entirely. I made those choices in ignorance, not arrogance. But this most recent departure to Virginia, that was made with full knowledge of your feelings, and I apologize for once again deciding what was best for you without asking. So I am asking now, what do you want from me, Helena? Not what you think is proper or appropriate, or in keeping with social convention, not what would be safest or least scandalous. What do you actually want? The question sat on the page, direct and challenging. Helena read it several times before continuing. I have spent 3 months in Virginia, trying to build something new. I have purchased land, hired workers, begun constructing a house that will take years to complete properly. The work is hard. The climate is brutal. The society here is rough compared to what I knew in England. But I am free in a way I never was at home. Free from my family's debts and reputation. Free from the weight of titles and expectations. Free to simply be a man trying to make something of himself on merit rather than lineage. But I am not free from you. Your letter travels in my pocket everywhere I go. I take it out, sometimes at night, and read it by candlelight in the half-built house that will be my home. And I wonder what you are doing in that moment. Whether you are happy, whether you have made peace with William, whether you think of me as often as I think of you. You asked me to share my life with you in letters rather than maintaining noble distance. So here is my life, unvarnished and honest. I wake at dawn and work until my hands bleed. I have learned to appreciate food that would appall a London chef. I have made friends with men who care nothing for my title or my past, only for whether I can swing an axe properly and drink whiskey without complaint. The land I purchased borders a river. The house I am building faces east, so I can watch the sunrise over water. I chose that location specifically because I remembered you once telling me that you loved mornings best, that you found hope in new beginnings. So every morning I sit on half-finished steps and watch the sun rise over Virginia, and I think of you waking in England, perhaps looking out your own window at the same sky hours earlier. This is connection, Helena. Imperfect and distant, but real. You are woven into every choice I make, every plan I build. I do not know if that brings you comfort or pain. I only know it is true. Helena pressed the letter against her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. He was alive, he was building a life, and he was thinking of her as she thought of him. Across impossible distance, through the small connection of shared sky and sunrise. The letter continued. You said you do not know what choice might exist for us, besides beautiful lies or painful distance. I have a thought on that, but it is unconventional enough that I hesitate to suggest it without knowing your mind first. So I will ask directly. Do you want to remain Lady Grayson? Is your marriage to William something you wish to preserve despite its lack of affection? Or if there were a way to build a different life, would you consider it? I ask not to pressure you, but to understand what is actually possible between us. If you are committed to your marriage, to remaining in England, to maintaining your current position, then I will adjust my expectations accordingly. I will continue to write to you as a friend and former love, nothing more. The letters will remain proper and distant enough to cause no scandal. But if you are not committed to that life, if you are willing to consider alternatives that society would condemn, then I need to know that as well, because the question of what I am building here in Virginia is not yet fully answered. A house can have one bedroom or two. Land can support one person or a household. Plans can be made for a solitary life or for something else entirely. Tell me the truth, Helena. All of it. What do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? 10 years? Where do you see yourself? Who do you see yourself with? And is there any world in which that vision includes me? I will not act on your answer until you are ready for me to act. If you need more time to decide, take it. If you need to maintain the fiction of contentment a while longer, I understand, but I need to know whether I am building a life for one or planning for possibilities that might never come to pass. Write to me honestly. I promise to receive whatever you say with grace, and I promise to stop making decisions for you. Whatever comes next, it will be your choice, Helene. Truly your choice. Yours across distance and ocean, waiting for your answer, Edmund. Helena read the letter 4 times. Then she sat at her writing desk and stared at blank paper for an hour, trying to find words adequate to answer his questions. What did she want? She had spent so long being what others needed her to be that the question felt almost foreign. But Edmund had asked, and he deserved an honest answer. She began to write, the words coming slowly at first, then faster as years of suppressed desires finally found voice. Dear Edmund, you ask what I want. So I will tell you. I want to wake in a house that faces east and watch the sunrise over water. I want to work until my hands ache building something that matters. I want conversations that last for hours about philosophy and books and ideas that have nothing to do with social obligation. I want to be seen, truly seen, by someone who knows my mind as well as my face. I want you, Edmund. I have always wanted you, but wanting you and being able to choose you are not the same thing. My marriage to William is not something I can simply dissolve on a whim. We have 8 years of history together. He has been kind to me in his way. He has given me security and respect. Leaving him would require either his consent to separation or grounds for annulment or divorce that I do not possess. Simply wanting to be with another man is not sufficient cause in the eyes of church or law. But William and I have spoken honestly about what our marriage is. He knows I love another. He has given me permission to correspond with you openly. He has agreed that we can maintain the appearance of marriage publicly while acknowledging privately that we are more business partners than husband and wife. It is not the dramatic escape you might be imagining. It is compromise and careful navigation of social expectations. It is finding freedom within constraints rather than shattering those constraints entirely. But it is something, Edmund. It is more honesty than I have had in years. As for what my life might look like in 5 years, 10 years, I do not know. I cannot predict whether William would agree to a formal separation if I asked. I cannot know if I have the courage to leave England for Virginia, even if such a thing became possible. I cannot promise you anything beyond what I have already given you. My truth, my letters, my heart, such as it is. But I can tell you this. I think of you every morning when the sun rises. I imagine you on half-finished steps, watching the same light hours before it reaches me. I carry your letters with me as you carry mine, and I am building something too, here in my own way. Building courage, building voice, building a self that is not defined by what others need me to be. So build your house for 2, Edmund. Not because I can promise I will fill that second bedroom, but because hope matters. Because planning for possibility is better than resigning ourselves to limitation. Build your house facing east. Build it strong and true, and trust that whatever happens, we are connected by more than letters, by morning light and shared sky, and the refusal to accept that beautiful lies are better than complicated truth. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it somehow. Even if that somehow is imperfect and unconventional and requires patience, we have already spent a decade learning. Yours in honesty and hope and morning light, Helena. She posted the letter the same day, walking to the village herself again, claiming space for this connection that was hers alone to manage. When she returned to Grayson Hall, William was in his study as usual, but this time when she passed his door, he looked up and met her gaze. "Letter to Virginia?" he asked, without judgment. "Yes." He nodded once. "Good. Honesty suits you better than pretense, Helena. Whatever comes of it, I think you are choosing rightly." It was a strange sort of blessing, but it meant everything. Permission to hope. Permission to explore possibilities. Permission to stop apologizing for wanting more than what duty had given her. The months that followed brought more letters. Edmund wrote of his progress on the house. Helena wrote of small changes at Grayson Hall. They shared books they were reading, thoughts on politics and philosophy, memories of their time together in her father's library. The correspondence was not romantic in the conventional sense, but it was intimate in ways that transcended physical distance. And slowly, Helena began to imagine a future that looked different from her present. Not as a dramatic escape or scandal, but as a gradual transformation. William aging into comfortable bachelorhood with a wife who managed his household, but not his heart. Helena finding freedom in the spaces between social obligation. Edmund building a life in Virginia that had room for her if circumstances ever allowed. It was not the fairy tale they might have had at 22. But it was real and honest, and filled with a hope that had been absent from Helena's life for too long. The letter that arrived 10 years late had changed everything she thought she knew about Edmund, about her past, about the choices she had made. And the letters that followed were changing her future, word by careful word, sunrise by shared sunrise, until the distance between England and Virginia began to feel less like an ocean and more like a bridge she might one day dare to cross. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If Helena's story has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more tales of love that transcends time, distance, and the complications that make life beautifully imperfect. Comment below and tell us what you would do in Helena's place. Your words keep these stories alive.